Meeny, meeny, miny, mo. All right. So we are going to be continuing in our books of 1st and 2nd Samuel today, and we are in a section where we are covering multiple chapters every week. So if you've been coming here for a while, you've probably heard me say this before, but in case it's your first time with us today, when we do these larger chunks of Scripture, there are times that in order to meet the time constraint that we have, I have to leave some stuff out. As we do that, it is not because those sections are unimportant, and I highly encourage you to go read the entirety of the passage in its fullness, because I think what you'll find is that the sections I skip are because they're usually a repeated section or additional information that doesn't pertain to the main story. But I like to let you know so that as we're going through, you'll notice I put all the verses right up here on the screen, but if you're following along in your own copy of the Bible, you'll be like, wait, he's missing verses. No, I know that they're there, and I do believe them to be important, but they don't pertain to the particular story we're looking at this week. So that's why that happens. With that in mind, to bring you up to speed as to where we've been so far in the book, we know that the book of Judges that we studied last year was a march to the bottom for Israel. It was a progression towards some of the worst times in Israel's history. But that God is going to be using the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel and the events that take place in them to start the journey back to the top, to restore Israel back to the glory that he had intended for it. But in that process, they were meant to choose God as their king. And that's why we titled this whole series, A Return to the King, because that is the direction that he desired for them, was for them to return and to choose him as their leader. But in the process, they started asking for a human king. And they were warned that in choosing a human king, they would end up with somebody who did not give to them the way that God intended to give to them, but rather would take from them and hurt them in the process. But they chose Saul anyway. They made the bad decision and decided to go with that anyway. In spite of that, God has promised not to forsake them, that he will continue to work with them, continue to bless them, and continue to be their God. And thus, we see that Saul's pride ends up being his downfall, but not the downfall of all of Israel. Instead, God provides a way out. God strives with Israel, and he raises up a new man, and David is that man, the man who's described as the man after God's own heart. And at this point in the story that we're looking at today, David has been anointed as Saul's replacement. It has been said that David will be the next king of Israel, but that hasn't happened yet. And now we're seeing a phase in David's life where he is on the run, because if he goes back to the king, Saul, the man who he had served as his armor bearer, he was his number 2 in command. If he goes back to that position, Saul is going to kill him. So David is on the run. Saul is actually trying to track him down to end his life because Saul doesn't want to be replaced. But David has already been told by God and by the prophet Samuel that he is going to replace Saul. So there's a conflict of interest there, and Saul is trying to end his life. So then now as we continue our story, this is how our next section starts. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him in his house at Ramah. And if you're following along in your own copy of the scripture, if you've been with us at this point, or if you just read the words that are on top of the screen, you will see that we are in 1 Samuel chapter 25. And Samuel has died. If we're in 1 Samuel, that's usually an indicator that there's another book coming next, usually 2 Samuel. But Samuel has died. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. If this book is about Samuel, how can Samuel be dead before we even reach the first half of the story? And this is not a John Steinbeck situation, if you don't know what I mean by that. One of my least favorite authors of all time is John Steinbeck. The Pearl's all right, but The Red Pony, statute of limitations is run. There's going to be a huge spoiler here in a second. Statute of limitations on John Steinbeck has long passed. But if you really, really are looking forward to reading The Red Pony and you haven't yet, plug your ears. I'm about to ruin the book for you. If you ever read the book The Red Pony dies in the first chapter of the book. I read that. I was reading that book for school, and I got to the first chapter. The red pony's dead. I don't want to read the rest of this book. This is a ridiculous. And from that day forward, I swore I hated John Steinbeck. I was not going to read anything more by him. I hated it. That is not what's happening here. The book of 1st and 2nd Samuel is not actually about Samuel. It's about Samuel's legacy. It is about what Samuel did for the nation of Israel. And that is what we are seeing to play out. What we are seeing is through Samuel's life, he appointed 2 kings. First, Saul, who is currently king, and David. And David is the more significant of those 2. And now, at the point of Samuel's death, David has already been anointed. Samuel has fulfilled his responsibility, and now we're going to see what plays out as his legacy. The interesting thing is there is some debate as to how much of this. Most scholars believe he wrote the book of Ruth, which is significant because that's where we learn that the son of Jesse is going to be king of Israel, and the first part of the 2 Samuels, up until, obviously, this. He didn't write anything after this verse. Because we see David all through the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel referenced as the son of Jesse. That is a title that's given to him. But there's really no significance to that other than Samuel had already written the book of Ruth, which referenced David as the coming king as the son of Jesse. So that's the connection there. That's Samuel's contribution. Well, the belief is that from this point forward in the book, Nathan actually takes over the writing. And Nathan is a character that we haven't even really met yet. He's not going to come into the story for a little while longer. But he is likely the one who finished 1st Samuel and then wrote almost the entirety of 2nd Samuel. So, if you were reading along, getting ahead this week, and you came across this verse and this confused you, that's why the books are named 1st and 2nd Samuel, even though Samuel dies in chapter 25 of the first book. All right, then David, the actual secondary hero. God is the hero of the story. David is our main character. David rose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. And there was a man in Maon, don't know, whose business was in Carmel. This man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep at Carmel. Now the name of this man was Nabal, and the name of his wife, Abigail. So now we know a couple of our main characters, except that the woman was discerning and beautiful, but the man was harsh and badly behaved. He was a Calebite. And David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men. And David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name, and thus you shall greet him. Peace be to you, and peace to your house, and peace be to all that you have." So the author here is telling us a little about the people we're about to interact with. Abigail, discerning, beautiful, lovely, wise, smart person. David, he's pretty great too. He is a person who is full of peace, and he only wants good for the people that he's interacting. Peace to you, peace to your house, peace to all that you have. These are all the good guys in our story. But Nabal, no, he was harsh and very badly behaved. But there's this line in here that may not be as significant to us, but to an original reader would have been very significant. Because in spite of the fact that he was harsh and badly behaved, he was a Calebite. What that tells us is that Nabal is actually a child of Israel. Caleb being one of the original judges of Israel, and one of the ones that was good. Othniel and Caleb were the first 2 judges in the book of Judges, and they were the good ones. They were the ones who led well. A Calebite, a descendant of Caleb, would have been somebody who was respected, somebody who would have been honored by God. And that's going to be very important here in just a second, because as David is interacting with this harsh and badly behaved man, the fact that he's a Calebite matters. Because David sends his young men and he says, "Peace be to you, peace be to your house, peace be to all that you have. I hear that you have shearers. Now, your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm. And they missed nothing all the time that they were in Carmel." It says, "Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David." What David sent these young men to say is, look, we don't want any kind of quarrel. It's all kinds of peace to your house, but we know that you are shearing. You now are reaping the harvest of your sheep and your goats. And said, your shepherds, though, the ones who were sent to keep them and tend them over the course of the year, they were with us while they were doing that, and we took care of them. We took care of your shepherds, likely because David himself, having grown up as a shepherd, had a heart for shepherds and chose to take them in and protect them when they were out in the wilderness. And as a result, they didn't miss anything. They didn't miss any meals. They had everything that they needed while they were out taking care of the sheep, shepherding the sheep for Nabal. So he's like, now that the time has come for harvest of that crop, of the sheep, of the wool, it's like, would you now take care of my men the way that I took care of your men? Seems to make sense that you would be able to take us in and feed us on this feast day. And when David's young men came, they said all this to Nabal in the name of David. And then they waited. And Nabal answered David's servants, "Who's David? Who's the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men who come from I don't know where?" The whole thing, Nabal's like, who are you? Why should I give you anything? But he kind of tells on himself here, because he says, who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? You're no big deal. I don't even know who you are. But then this next line, there are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters, indicates that Nabal knows David's story. Nabal knows that David is in the process of running away from Saul, which means he actually does know who David is. He would have known the relationship he had with Saul. He would have known why David was running away from Saul. Otherwise, why insert this line about servants breaking away from their masters? Which means he knows that David is running from Saul because David has been anointed the next king of Israel. He knows that Samuel has anointed him the next king of Israel and thus has to run away from Saul. Which means by rejecting David, he's rejecting Samuel. Samuel, who was chosen to be the voice piece, the prophet of God, which means by rejecting David, he's rejecting Samuel. By rejecting Samuel, he's rejecting God. He is making a decision here as to who he is going to follow. And it is not the anointed king that God has put as the next in charge, but rather Saul, the man who wants him dead. So David's young men turned away and came back and told him all of this. And David said to his men, "Every man strap on a sword." And every man then of them strapped on his sword. And David also strapped on his sword. And about 400 men went up after David, while 200 remained with the baggage. Basically, David goes, okay, that was a choice. We're going to deal with this. Everybody get your sword. We're going to battle. We're going to go kill this guy. And what we're going to see is not just this guy. He was prepared to wipe out his entire household. Like he was coming to bear. He's like, look, insult me all you want. Probably even insult Samuel all you want. But you choose something other than God, we're going to have issues. Everybody put on your sword. We're going to battle. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, says, "Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to greet our master. He rallied at them. He railed at them. Sorry, let me read that in the English language it's written in. And he railed at them. Yet the men were very good to us, and we suffered no harm, and we did not miss anything while we were in the fields, as long as we went with them. They were a wall to us, both day and night, all the while we were keeping the sheep." So one of these shepherds comes to Abigail, Nabal's wife, and says, look, the entire time we were with David, he and his men protected us. They were like a wall around us, keeping us safe. They cared for us well. Now, therefore, know this and consider what you should do. For harm is determined against our master and against all his house, and he is such a worthless man that one cannot speak to him. So what he's saying is, I tried to go to your husband, I tried to talk to your husband, I tried to tell him, we really should take care of this David guy. He was really good to us. We should return the favor. He won't listen to us. He is such an angry, ignorant man that he is unwilling to hear reason from anyone. So I'm coming to you, hoping that you will do something about this, because David's not going to take this lying down. And there is bad things coming for us if we don't get this right. And Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep, and already prepared, and 5 seahs of parched grain, and 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on donkeys. And she said to her young men, "Go on before me. Behold, I come after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. So she gets all this food together. She's going to take this to David, and she gets them all ready to go, and then sends messengers ahead so that they can intercept David before David makes it to their house. Tell him to wait just a minute. We're coming. We've got a plan. And she's bringing food to David. And when Abigail saw David, she hurried and got down from the donkey and fell before David on her face and bowed to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "On me alone, my lord, be the guilt. Please let your servant speak in your ears and hear the words of your servant. And now let this present that your servant has brought to my lord be given to the young men who follow my lord. And when the Lord has done to my lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you prince over Israel, my lord shall have no cause of grief or pangs of conscience for having shed blood without cause, or for my lord working salvation himself. And when the Lord has dealt well with my lord, then remember your servant." So what Abigail says is, look, I am bringing you this food, I'm bringing you this present, I am asking you to take mercy on my husband and not act out against him. She says, because I don't want you to get to the other side of this campaign. I don't want you to get to the point where you finally are anointed king and look back and have any guilt, anything that you would feel bad about having done in anger or in this time of desperation. So I brought you this food. Only thing I ask in return is when you're king, when God has done everything he has promised for you, again indicating they had a very good idea of who David was. It wasn't an accident. His name has already progressed through the land. Like when you are king, when God fulfills the anointing and puts you in that position, remember me then. And David says to Abigail, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. Blessed be your discretion, and blessed be you who have kept me this day from blood guilt and from working salvation with my own hand." So David is saying, thank you. Thank you for stepping in on behalf of your husband, but also thank you for waking me up and helping me understand that what I was about to do would not have been good. I would have been guilty of Nabal's blood because he was a Calebite, because he was an Israelite. David says, I shouldn't have let my anger rule the day. I shouldn't have gone out to attack him because he is actually my brother. He is my friend. He is someone who is an Israelite with me. It was never my responsibility to judge him. It was never my responsibility to attack him. If he has chosen to reject our God, God will deal with that. I don't need to work salvation with my own hand. I can trust God to defend himself. C.S. Lewis would famously say, you don't need to defend God any more than you need to defend a lion. Just open the cage and let him do the work. The interesting thing is, that's almost exactly what happens. He says, "For surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has restrained me from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, truly by morning there had not been left to Nabal so much as one male." Then David received from her hand what she had brought him, and he said to her, "Go up in peace to your house. See, I have obeyed your voice, and I have granted your petition." He says, as far as I'm concerned, I was going to wipe out Nabal's entire house. Now, because you have intervened on his behalf, because you have been such a blessing to your husband and to me, go up in peace. I'm going to give you what you asked for. And Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he was holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until the morning light. And in the morning, when the wine had gone out of Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. And about 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. So Nabal, initially, partying like a king. Clearly, he wasn't missing any of the food that his wife had taken. Didn't even occur to him that anything was gone. That's how well off this guy was. So he's just partying. And then when he finally sobers up, she tells him what's going on, and like he's mad. He is so just distraught that his wife has done this to him, that he becomes like a stone. He says his heart dies within him, just solidifying the decision that he had made. And because of that, about 10 days later, David doesn't have to do anything. God defends his own name, strikes Nabal, and Nabal dies. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed be the Lord who has avenged the insult that I received at the hand of Nabal, and has kept back his servant from wrongdoing. The Lord has returned the evil of Nabal on his own head." Then David sent and spoke to Abigail to take her as his wife. So David says, God has done this great thing. I was going to defend myself. I chose not to. I left it to God, and God did not disappoint. God did exactly what I thought God would do. He visited judgment on Nabal, and he dealt with the issue, so I didn't have to. I am not guilty. God is righteous. And then he sends to take Abigail as his wife. Like, this seems weird at first, except that Abigail has done a great gift, a great service to David. And without her husband, with her husband being dead, that was going to leave her in a very bad position. It would not in this culture have been a good position for a widow. Even with all the wealth that she would have had, she would have lost that fairly quickly. If she didn't have someone to defend her in this culture, people would have come in and just taken it. So David is actually returning a favor here by choosing to take Abigail as his wife. And Abigail hurried and rose and mounted a donkey, and her 5 young women attended her. And she followed the messengers of David and became his wife. David also took Achnoim, not sure how you actually say it, of Jezreel, and both of them became his wives. It says, for Saul had given Michal his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, the son of Laish, who was of Galim. Right. So this is a cultural element that can sometimes be confusing for us. But it falls squarely in the realm of, there are times in the Old Testament where we have to understand the difference between something being prescriptive and something being descriptive. This is absolutely a descriptive portion of Scripture. It is telling us what has happened. It is not necessarily telling us that we should go do the same. There are clear elements of, like, Abraham believed God and it was counted unto him as righteousness. Prescriptive. Definitely believe in God, definitely have faith in God, and it will be counted unto us as righteousness. David starts collecting wives to himself. That's more of a descript. I would not suggest this as a strategy moving forward in your life. But for David, this seems appropriate, almost actually to the fact that it looks like God is the one who is organizing these things in his life. God is the one who kills Nabal. God is the one who brings Abigail into David's life, as opposed to Michal, his first wife, who was the daughter of Saul. Saul was the one who gave Michal to David. And at this point, it tells us that Saul has actually taken Michal back, his daughter back, and given her to someone else in David's absence. And all this is just pointed out to tuck away in the back of our brains, because we're going to find as we work through the life of David that who he has as a wife and the women in David's life end up being a bit of a problem. And this is the first of those instances where we're starting to see that crop up. This will come up again later. And then the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, is not David hiding himself on the hill of, no, not even going to try, which is on the east of Jeshimon. So Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul encamped on the hill of that place, which is beside the road on the east of Jeshimon. But David remained in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness, David sent out spies and learned that Saul had indeed come. And David rose and came to the place where Saul had encamped. And David saw the place where Saul lay, with Abner the son of Ner, the commander of his army. And Saul was laying within the encampment, while the army was encamped around him. Then David said to Ahimelech the Hittite, and to Joab's brother Abishai the son of Zeruiah, who will go down with me into the camp to Saul? And Abishai said, I will go down with you. So David and Abishai went away to the army by night. And there lay Saul sleeping within the encampment, and his spear stuck in the ground at his head. And Abner and the army lay around him. So Saul gets word of where David is. Saul goes to chase David down. David finds out that Saul is chasing him and goes to check it out for himself. And sure enough, comes across Saul and his entire army, and they're all asleep. So he says to his two closest guys, come with me, we're going to go check this out. And the one, Abishai, goes with him, and the two of them sneak into the camp. And as they're staying there, they see the king of Israel laying on the ground with a spear at his head and a jug of water. This is, again, like the cave we saw last week, the perfect opportunity for David to become king, to no longer be running from Saul, to no longer have his life be threatened. This is his opportunity. It's sitting right before him. And Abishai, he sees this immediately. Because Abishai says to David, God has given your enemy into your hand this day. Now's your chance. Now please, let me pin him to the earth with one stroke of the spear, and I will not strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, do not destroy him. For who can put out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? So Abishai sees Saul there, spear on the ground, jug of water next to his head, and goes, look, it would take one shot, man. This is not, I would not need to even pull my sword. One stroke of the spear, this guy's no longer a problem. Let's get this done. And David again says, no. David says, I will not destroy him. I don't want you to destroy him. No one can attack the one that the Lord has anointed and be guiltless. And this statement has twofold meaning. Because David is saying that about Saul. David's saying, I can't strike Saul because if we strike Saul, we bring guilt upon ourselves and we will need to be judged for that. But there's another person in this story who is the anointed of God, and that's David. In the same way that David can't attack Saul and still be guiltless, Saul can't attack David and still be guiltless. What he's saying is Saul is already bringing guilt upon himself. Saul is already bringing judgment upon himself. I'm going to let God deal with that, not me. And David said, as the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him, or his day will come to die, or he will go down into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against the Lord's anointed. But take now the spear that is at his head and the jar of water, and let us go. So David took the spear and the jar of water from Saul's head, and they went away. No man saw it or knew it, nor did any awake, for they were all asleep, because the deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. Then David went over to the other side and stood far off on the top of the hill, and with a great space between them. And David called to the army and to Abner and the son of Ner, saying, will you not answer, Abner? And Abner answered, who are you? Who calls to the king? And David says to Abner, are you not a man? Who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not kept watch over your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy the king, your lord. And this thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die, because you have not kept watch over your lord, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is in the jar of water that was at his head. David just starts to taunt Abner, because Abner's the commander of the king's army. Abner is the one who's standing at the right hand of the king, a position that David used to hold, a position that David used to be in that slot. He was the one who was once responsible to keep Saul safe. And what he's calling out, he's like, Abner, you're not even a man. You're not even doing your job. What you have like the second most important position in Israel. That's the who is like you in Israel. It's like the king and Abner. And you couldn't even do the one thing you were asked to do. Your job was to keep the king safe. But today, this very night, someone snuck into your camp to kill your king and had every chance to do it. You have failed. And Saul recognized David's voice and says, is this your voice, my son David? And David said, it is my voice, my lord, O king. And he said, why does my Lord pursue after his servant? For what have I done? What evil is on my hands? The idea here is you put Abner in this position the position that I once had, that I didn't fail at. I was good at my job. I kept you safe. I was your servant. I protected you. I did everything you asked me to do. And for some reason, you now want to kill me. It's like, this doesn't make sense. This isn't fair. I've done nothing wrong. Abner deserves to die. I deserve to live. And then Saul says, I have sinned. Return my son David, for I will no more do you harm, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I have acted foolishly and have made a great mistake. And David answered and said, Here is the spear, O king. Let one of the young men come over and take it. And the Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord gave you into my hand today, and I would not put out my hand against the Lord's anointed. Saul acknowledges that he is the one in the wrong here. It's not going to change anything. We're going to see that here in just a second. But he at least acknowledges he's the one who's in the wrong. And David says, great, you can have the spear back. You can have the water bottle back. I never intended to take anything from the king. Unlike the previous time, we see David's guilt, I think, from the last time coming back. In this one, he didn't take anything from Saul that could not be restored back to Saul. He gives him back everything, puts everything back the way it was. So he's done no harm to Saul this time, not even to his garments. And then he ends with this statement, the Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. It's a really interesting thing to say right after Saul has acknowledged that he is not the righteous one. David is. David is saying, look, I know that God is going to reward me for what I've done today. I don't need you to be the one to tell me that I'm great or I'm righteous. God will take care of that. In the same way, the inverse of that is true. If you are the one who's in sin, if you are the one who is acting foolishly, the way that Saul says it, God's going to deal with that too. He says, behold, as your life was precious this day in my sight, so may my life be precious in the sight of the Lord. And may he deliver me out of all tribulation, subtext, that you're bringing. And then Saul said to David, blessed be you, my son David, you will do many things and will succeed in them. So David went his way, and Saul returned to the palace. So even in spite of Saul now seeing the light and changing and deciding he's not angry anymore, David, you can come back. David's like, no. We have run this cycle too many times. You get angry, you throw spears at me. I run away. You get angry, you chase me down in the wilderness, I cut your cloak, and everything's good. Then you get angry, you chase me down in the wilderness, and I come and steal your spear. I'm not coming back with you. I'm not doing this again. So Saul returns to his palace. David goes his own way. He's like, I'm not doing it. But that leaves David in a very weird place. Because he's supposed to be king. His place should be in the kingdom. He's been anointed the next king of Israel. He should be getting everything he ever dreamed of. He should be able to go back and live in harmony until the day that God finally puts him in his place as king. But that's not what he does. He goes his own way, again, waiting for God to show up. So then David says in his heart, now I shall perish one day at the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will despair seeking me any longer within his borders of Israel, and I shall escape out of his hand. So David rose and went over, he and the 600 men that were with him, to Achish, the son of Moach, the king of Gath. So David says, look, I've run this cycle so many times, I am so discouraged, I'm not even going to stay in Israel anymore. I'm going to go into the land of the enemy, the Philistines, because that's the best thing I can think to do. David lets his despair and his depression with this constant cycle of aggression overwhelm him to the point that he leaves. And living in the land of Achish, David, it says this, and David lived with Achish at Gath, and he and his men, every man with his household, and David with his 2 wives, Anoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, Nabal's widow. And when it was told Saul that David had fled to Gath, he no longer sought him, which was exactly what David said. If I go to the Philistines, Saul will leave me alone. Then David says to Achish, if I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be given me in one of the country towns, that I may dwell there. For why should your servant dwell in the royal city with you? It's like, I'm not a king of the Philistines. I don't belong here. So that day Achish gave him Ziklag. Therefore Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah to this day. This is where they took possession of it. It was in peace, not in war. And the number of the days that David lived in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. So David's going to live here for 1 year and 4 months while he's waiting for Saul to give up and leave him alone. Now David and his men went up and made raids against the Geshurites and the Gizrites and the Amalekites, for these were the inhabitants of the land from of old, as far as Shur to the land of Egypt. And David would strike the land and would leave neither man nor woman alive, but would take away the sheep, the oxen, the donkeys, the camels, and the garments, and come back to Achish. Now this is one of those other cultural points where an Israelite reading this for the first time would have recognized these names, and it would have been incredibly significant to them. Today, maybe if you grew up in church, if you spent a lot of time in Sunday school, you might recognize the name of the Amalekites might stick out to you as a of the Israelites. We hear about them, the Edomites a lot, the Midianites, but the idea here is David, while living with the Philistines, is attacking and raiding and destroying enemy strongholds of Israel, people who Israel had real issues with, all the way down to the land of Egypt. But when he's doing it, he's wiping them out so that the king, Achish, who he's living with, doesn't know who he's attacking. He's just bringing him sheep and oxen. He's bringing him all the loot and saying, here, king, have this loot. We are conquering people in your name, not in the name of God of Israel, even though the people that he's attacking are exactly the people that God would have told him to attack. So even in his depression, even as he's exiled from Israel, he's still doing the work of God afar. But when Achish asks, where have you made a raid today? David would say, against the Negev of Judah, or against the Negev of the Jehemielites, or against the Negev of the Kenites. And David would leave neither man nor woman alive and bring news to Gath, saying, lest they should tell about us and say, so David has done. Again, a list of names that we might not recognize, but all of these, the Negev is just a plain or a desert area of Judah, Jehemielites, and Kenites. These are descendants of Israel. These are Israelite nations. So he's attacking enemies of Israel, and then when he returns the loot to Achish, who's providing, he's saying, yeah, we're just taking out those Israel people that you don't like. We're just taking out the Jewish people you don't like. But he's not leaving anybody alive to report back, so the king doesn't have any idea that he's actually working for Israel, not against Israel. Such was his custom all the while he lived in the country of the Philistines. And Achish trusted David, thinking, he has made himself an utter stench to the people of Israel, therefore he shall always be my servant. So because of what David's doing, because of the raids that David's doing, this king, this Philistine king, is thinking to himself, all right, so this next king of Israel guy, he works for me now. All the while, what he doesn't know is that David is still just as loyal to the God who anointed him the next king of Israel. He is just as loyal to Israel as he has ever been, even as he lives in exile, even as he works against the people who have taken him in. So what? This is a lot. This was like 3 chapters. We just plowed through 25 through 27. What does it matter today? Well, one, this is a theme that you're going to see all through David's exile, all through the time that David is running. He keeps coming back to this main theme. The battle belongs to the Lord. It says it's God's responsibility to take care of Saul. It's God's responsibility to defend me. It's God's responsibility to take care of Nabal. Whatever battle I am faced with, whatever struggle I am faced with, it is God's responsibility to deal with it, not mine. Which means I need to be obedient, and as I fight this battle, I need to fight it God's way. And this is really easy for us to say as we look at David. But last I checked, not too many of us are in exile from a foreign king in a land that we were promised that one day we would be the king of. If you, by the way, are anointed king of another nation and I don't know about it, we should go out for coffee. I'd love to hear the story. B, I'd love to be your second in command whenever you take power. Anyway, but we are constantly called to fight a battle, right? We are called, as in today's age, to fight a battle against sin in our own lives. We're called to fight battles of getting the gospel out to the world and reaching the world for Christ, to go into all nations, declaring to them what Christ has taught us, and to make disciples, to reach all people, teach what Jesus has taught, grow to be like him, and to do that together. We are called to a battle on the behalf of our God, which means, while it is his battle to win this planet to himself, if we are going to participate in that, we have to do it his way. And God has anointed one very special tool, one very special weapon to fight that battle. And you're in it today. This is called the church age because this is the age whereby God has decreed that the church is going to be his army. The church is going to be his weapon. The church is going to be the thing that he uses to impact, to win this age. Which means when we are going to fight God's way, we do that by coming in line with and coming in community with his church. Which means if we want to win the battle, if we want to fight the battle God's way, we need to do it with other Christians, with other people in our life. Whether that be being here on Sunday, participating in a small group, doing the things that we need to, having accountability partners. Now I'm kind of stealing from later messages here, but that will speak hard truths into our lives. We need to do this the way that God has designed it to be done. Because if we don't, if we try to do it our way, if we say things like, I can do this on my own, the greatest lie that the devil has ever told us, is that we can do it on our own, that, even if you have temporary success, will ultimately mean we are not fighting the battle the way God wants it fought. We're fighting the way we want it fought. So the question is this: what is it that you need to surrender today? What is it that you have been trying to go to battle for, to battle against, where you have decided that you're going to do it your way? What is it in your life that you have to say, nope, from this point forward, God, I'm going to do this your way? And my encouragement to you is whatever that thing is, and I don't know what your thing is, I know what my thing is. Whatever that thing is for you, the first step towards fighting his way in community with the church is to tell somebody. To look around the room or to look around your life and say, this is the other believer, this is the brother, this is the sister, this is the person that I can go to and say, this is the thing I was fighting my way. Here is how I'm going to fight it your way moving forward, God. Will you help me? Will you fight this battle with me God's way? Ask them to pray with you. If you don't have anybody, if you're like, man, I don't know anybody in this room. There is nobody that I would trust like that. I can vouch. Pat is a really good guy for that. He's one of my guys for that. He's one of the guys that I go to. If you have nobody else, go to Pat. If you're a woman and you're like, I don't want to go to Pat, Audrey is a really great source for that. You go to talk to Audrey. She would be a great source for that for you. But whatever you do, let's start doing this God's way, where we fight whatever battles he's brought into us and trust him with the outcome, not ourselves. Let's pray. God, I thank you that you are a trustworthy God. That when we decide to do things your way, even if it looks crazy, even if it means we're running in a wilderness for an extra year, 4 months, living in the land of the enemy, fighting your battles in a situation that we never would have expected, we know that you are still trustworthy even when we don't understand what it looks like. God, I pray that you would give us the strength, give us the courage, give us the boldness to do it your way, even when it doesn't make sense. Because we know your way is right. We know that you are righteous, that you are good, and we trust you. I pray these things in your Son's name.